Welcome to the Irish NFL Show in association with QuinnBet. This is our Monday evening Week 2 recap show. Well, actually, it's 7/8 or 87.5%, if you prefer it expressed that way, of a recap, because there are two more games to take place: Texans, Bucks, and Raiders, Chargers. Happy Monday to all of you watching our live stream, which also goes out on our website, www.irishnflshow.com. I still put in the www. I can see you smiling there, Shane. What a boomer thing to say. Obviously, it's www. Welcome also of you to those of us, or those of you even listening back to the podcast. In week 2, we wondered, if there's no show like a Joe show, well, what do you do when you've no Joe? That's the question the Bengals had to answer. They needed help from Jake Browning to get a win against the Jags. Bears fans, meanwhile, were browning their trousers as their team got mauled by the Lions. And Giants Cowboys produced an overtime classic, won by a walk-off field goal. Sorry, Kieran Boyle. We start, though, with the Eagles beating the Chiefs in that Super Bowl rematch. And Kieran O'Donovan, I hope tight end Travis Kelce wraps his loving arms a lot more tightly and securely around Taylor Swift than he did around that football, because that bobble that turned into an interception in the end zone from a Patrick Mahomes pass turned the game in favor of the Eagles, did it not?
Absolutely, yeah. It was a big moment, and not quite the repeat of the Super Bowl. It wasn't as one-sided an affair. In fact, it was one of these close games that the Chiefs became accustomed to winning last season. And we talked about that. It was a 10-0 or 10-1 in these one-score games that the Chiefs were last year, and this is another one that they'll feel that got away from them. They were in the game in Brazil last week, and they were in this game as well with a great shout driving into the end zone. And yeah, as you said, Travis Kelce picks that ball, lets the ball spill, picked up by the safety, wasn't it? And he took off. Could have been a pick six, except for it was Josh Simmons ran him down.
Josh Simmons, was the right tackle.
Yeah,
the closing speed on that one was 18.3 miles per hour. Like, just for context, that's as fast as Micah Parsons, an edge rusher, runs when he takes down a quarterback. This dude is like twice the size of anyone else on the pitch. That was a supreme effort.
And I think it was only the second fastest offensive line speed, and I don't know who was the fastest, but you'd like to have seen what kind of a situation that was. But look, the resounding...
They normally only move that fast to the buffet line.
Absolutely. Maybe that's when it was clocked. But look, we can get into the detail of the game, and look, there's a glaring need, I think, for Rashee Rice to get back for the Chiefs, to give them that long ball option. Mahomes did some Mahomes things. He was fantastic. Saquon Barkley was fantastic. Mahomes in patches was fantastic, but he just needs that bit of extra help. I think, as I said, the resounding thing is the Chiefs losing these games, and they find themselves 0-2, and not just for the first time in Mahomes' professional career. I heard last night on the broadcast that it was his first time since he was a sophomore in high school that he went 0-2 to start the season. So it's new territory for the Chiefs, and we talked about the
I was 0 a lot more than 2 in high school, I'll tell you that for nothing. We're not even talking about the football field here.
But look, again, I was listening to more broadcasts today. There is that temptation, nobody's writing off the Chiefs or anything like that. But I think what we did allude to, or the possibility we did allude to at the start of the season, is now a reality when you've got this strong division, and you're looking at Vegas getting off to a great start, and they're playing the Chargers tonight, and one of those teams is going to be 2-0. The Chiefs are at the bottom of the pile, and it's week 2. Pump the brakes on the dramatics, but definitely it feels like there's a different season ahead for the Chiefs. It's not going to be a case of coasting through the division, taking the division for granted, and then starting to ramp it up in the playoffs. There, it looks like it's going to be a slog for them to get there and to try and take control of this division. And the Eagles, again, there was a bit of a argy-bargy, I think, between, was it Jalen Hurts and who was it? It was Chris Jones. Yeah, he was barking at Hurts for only having 100 yards or something like that, and Hurts gave him the perfect shutdown. We're winning the game. Shut the F up. It was as simple as that. So that's a true sign, I think, of a great leader in Jalen Hurts. If he really believes that he's not going to whinge and whine about his lack of production. If they're getting wins, they proved again in a tough game that they're still the class of the NFC.
Shane, it's hard to feel too worried unless I'm being unnecessarily glib about the Chiefs at the same time. I mean, like, firstly, we saw the Ravens go 0-2 last year, and they then roared through the rest of their schedule. Yeah, the Chiefs have lost 2 tight enough ones here, one against the Chargers in Sao Paulo, and now against the Eagles, the reigning Super Bowl champs. But they'll get Rashee Rice back Xavier Worthy will return from injury. Patrick Mahomes continues to do Patrick Mahomes things, and in some ways, it's actually a delight to watch Mahomes in adversity because you really see him having to dip into the full range of his bag of tricks, and there isn't going to be a dodgy, unfortunate Kelsey bobble every week. The Chiefs were probably due for the ball to bounce the other way, as Kieran was pointing out in one-score games. You kind of feel they'll be okay.
Yeah, I think so. I think there's a lot of people like, Colin Coward this morning is like, that's it. The Chiefs are done. They're dead. Forget about them from here on in. I think that's a bit of an overreaction. As just because you're sliding doesn't mean you're completely gone. What is interesting about this, though, is you mentioned it there that against the Chargers, that was a close one, and this is a close one as well. These are games that the Chiefs usually win. The Chiefs are a team that usually, in these close moments, they find a way to put it out of the bag. And they haven't done that so far this year. I think that aspect is worrying because outside of Patrick Mahomes, where are the playmakers offensively speaking? Defensively, they had a pretty solid game. The Eagles, that didn't exactly light it up. The big thing for them is the fact that their offensive line created some really nice. The offensive line that the Eagles have is just absolutely outstanding, not just in terms of the tush push, but in terms of the room they made for Saquon Barkley. I was had really good fun in the office today explaining that to a coworker of mine who's just getting into the game, and I was explaining them out to create a space. But it was really interesting to see that from the Eagles. But from the Chiefs' point of view, like Mahomes, like had to make plays on his feet because the receivers weren't giving him much. Tyquan Thornton had the really nice catch with the touchdown, didn't do much as the rest of the game. Hollywood Brown had a lot of drops. And look, Travis Kelce, the expectation for a production from Travis Kelce is obviously going to change as he gets older. He was unlucky with that one, to be fair. I don't really think we can slam him for what was ended up being the game-changing play. But look, it all depends now on what the Chiefs do from here as to whether they decide to change their game plan, to check down a bit more, to try and get more from the wide receivers instead of going for deep passes. Mahomes obviously was successful going for deep passes for the pass to Tyquan Thornton, but hasn't been getting much joy from that this year. Last year, they didn't really go for many deep passes. It was much more shallow in terms of the depth of ball that Mahomes is throwing. I think they need to return to that a little bit more. That actually might get a bit more, that sort of old West Coast style offense, just getting the downs, keep everything moving. And if the game is close, finding a way to keep it close and get on the right side of things. But what they really need is playmakers. I heard some people suggesting that Tyreek Hill could potentially make a move back to Kansas City. I'm not quite sure if I really believe that until I see it, especially because Tyreek Hill is dealing with his own legal issues, let's say. So yeah, I'm
Chiefs
not.
must have more lawyers than Scott and Arps at this stage. I mean, the amount of legal trouble their guys have to deal with.
It is quite a Boston Legal. I want to do an offshoot. They can do one in Kansas City for sure. But yeah, look, I'm not gonna declare the Chiefs dead just yet. There's still plenty of season to go. If this is the Bengals starting 0-2, but Joe Burrow was still fit, we'd be like, look, the Bengals have plenty of room to work back into the season. I think the same applies to the Chiefs here, but they need to find ways to get more out of the wide receivers. And if that means that Mahomes isn't passing the ball so deep and is letting the wide receivers do more with the ball in hand, then they're probably going to have to resort to doing that.
Kieran Boyle, I'm conscious that we've just spent the last 5 or 6 minutes talking about the team that lost that game. The team that came out of GHA Field 2-0 was the Eagles, who have the luxury of only needing 27 yards from A.J. Brown to go and beat the Kansas City Chiefs on their home turf. They're in pretty good health.
Oh, they're in excellent health. I mean, Brown, Devonta Smith at 53 yards. And like we said earlier, Jalen Hurts, he had just over 100 yards, 15 of 22. I mean, that's your standard kind of Jalen Hurts. I don't want to say pedestrian because at this stage, he's just orchestrating everything. And they almost don't have to get out of, second gear. That was a really big hype around this game yesterday. I mean, Fox was there from sunrise yesterday in Kansas City downtown doing the show. But the game, it felt like almost kind of like an afterthought, really. I mean, it didn't seem like it was, the Kansas City atmosphere definitely wasn't there for me. I mean, I don't know if it's the fact that the fans might be sensing there's a change in the air. But if you think about the change that there's been in the league between when we were in New Orleans, Shane and I, and the rest of the guys in February, when it was all Kansas City, all the money was on Kansas City. They were the reigning champions, Kelce, Mahomes, all these guys. And the Eagles were, like I said, almost an afterthought. Now the shift has been so rapid in the last 7 months. The Eagles are now in the ascent. There is absolutely, they are just cruising right now. They're crushing everybody. I mean, that's indicative of the tush push. They're imposing their will. They're imposing their strength, their physical strength, their mental strength on every single team. They're crushing everybody below them. Saquon had a nice game, 22 and 88 for a touchdown. But there was no spectacular numbers yesterday. There was no real spectacular plays except for the Makuba pick. But it was all, I don't want to say it was pedestrian or boring. It was the Eagles just squeezing the throat of the Chiefs. And if they're doing that to the Chiefs, I mean, the rest of the league must be terrified at this stage because, they, like I said, they took the crowd out of it. The Chiefs crowd was not really a factor, which is a very rare thing because they're always, that they have that decibel level there all the time. But it was very telling that the Eagles just kind of slowly squeezed the life out of the Chiefs. And you can see that frustration because, Mahomes and Kelce must sense there's some sort of change in the water because Kelce, I'm not going to say his powers are diminishing, but he's not the type to drop a pass like that. And Mahomes airballed a pass yesterday towards the end. It must have been 15 yards. I can't remember which receiver it was, but that sailed right over his head. And that's not like Mahomes. It's I can sense a little bit of a change in the atmosphere right now with the ascendancy in the NFL. But I mean, the Eagles have won 7 straight. They've won 17 of the last 18. They've won 3 straight now over KC. So who's the Kings in the NFL now? I mean, you can't say it's KC anymore. The Eagles are just. We say it every week to the point that it's becoming redundant. That there are no weak spots in this team. They even have the best known security guy in the league too now. So it's it's very I don't want to say it's scary for the league because there's anybody can beat anybody on a Sunday, but they just look they didn't even get out of second gear and they crushed the Chiefs and they put up 20 points and it really did feel like it was more than that. Like Kieran said when Jones was chirping on the line. That's the kind of thing you do when you're down by 30 and you're trying to get in the head of the quarterback. They were only down by 3 and they only won by 3, the Eagles. But it felt like a lot more. It definitely felt like there was a shift in the kind of the landscape of the league yesterday. And the Eagles are that's another week of them imposing the will and dominating the team that they were against. So scary for the league, but we'll see any given Sunday.
Kieran O'Donovan, the Cincinnati Bengals did beat the Jacksonville Jaguars over the weekend, as we were saying at the top of the show, but at significant cost because Joe Burrow is out now for at least 3 months. He has turf toe, which is the worst name of any quite serious injury you can possibly have. I've had turf toe, or metatarsophalangeal strain, as it's medically known. It's really painful. I've had a grade 1 turf toe, and that's not fun. It really hampers your mobility. It's really, really painful. Joe Burrow, it appears from what we understand, has a grade 3 strain, which is effectively a tear of the ligament that connects your big toe to the rest of your foot. That's painful. It's surgery. It's a long rehab, and it's probably going to change the complexion of the AFC North.
Yeah, and that really is the only. It overshadows any other talking point from this game. I mean, you can talk about the stats from Jacksonville's point of view, from Cincinnati's point of view. It was, on paper, it was a really good, tight, close game, 27-31 up and down the field. But, with all due respect to Jacksonville, the injury of Joe Burrow is the story of this game. And it's such a weird position that they're in because they find themselves in the best statistical position they've been in years. They're 2-0. They would have bitten your hand off for 2-0 for the last 3 or 4 years. But they're clearly in the worst position they could be without their leader. And it's hard to see, how they're going to navigate through the next 3 months, because 3 months is an awful long time. That takes you right up to December realistically. And I'm right in saying that, quick maths. But I mean, they're 2-0. They did get production from T. Higgins from Jamar Chase last night. Like Jamar Chase, 165 yards, 14 receptions, touchdown. T. Higgins, he had 56 yards, and Jake Browning came in, and he acquitted himself quite well under the circumstances, and they needed Jake Browning to be good to get over the line. And it could, at the end of the season, it could prove absolutely vital. So now what you need to do is you need to decide, if you're the Bengals, what do we do? Do we put all our faith in Jake Browning to carry us and just get enough wins for maybe Joe Burrow to come back and try and scrape us into the playoffs? Do you go out and look for a Kirk Cousins? Are the likes of Trey Lance an option? Or do you ride with Browning and see how you get on? Or do you write the season off? And I think they've invested too much financially and to to write the season off. So they have a lot of decisions to make, and it's going to be a tough week now in Cincinnati to try and pick themselves up from this. Again, even coming off their second win after the first 2 weeks.
Kieran Boyle, meanwhile, on Jags watch, there are encouraging signs there in the Liam Cohn era. I mean, it's not perfect. Cincinnati's not an easy place to go to win with or without Joe Burrow. They do seem to be trending in the right direction, if I'm being cautiously optimistic.
I think that's a good way to put it, but I think that's a game that the Jags they let get away, and with Houston next week, that's one they couldn't afford to lose, really. That was a game that they had won. I mean, they were training real well in the first and second quarter. Lawrence was looking lively. Not great in the red zone. A lot of overthrown passes in the red zone, and he was picked off twice. I mean, that's the worry with Lawrence. I mean, his ball security, and I think that was what was really. I mean, we all saw the clip of Cohn on the sideline patting his chest. I mean, that's the issue. I mean, Lawrence was sailing a lot of balls when he should have been drilling them in between the numbers. But that's a game the Jags lost, and it's all the radio stations and the sports guys. It's a typical Jags loss. They were there, they were in it, and they shot themselves in the foot, and they found a way to lose. I mean, that was a decent performance from them. I'm not going to say it was a bad performance. Again, I've said in the past, once they get ETN running, that's the key. They got ETN on the ground. They got a nice mix up between BTJ and Hunter. Had some nice catches on offense too, but the general consensus is that it was a really bad Jags loss. The pass interference penalty on Travis Hunter on that fourth down was the telling moment. And I think it's Lawrence for me was wasteful, and I could see how Cohn was angry on the sideline. There was plenty of opportunities in the third quarter where they could have wrapped it up, but they were driving down the field. But the red zone effectiveness is something that's affected the Jags the last couple of years. Instead of running the ball with trust in ETN, they were firing the ball too high over, sailing the ball over a lot of receivers. I'd be a little concerned about Jacksonville, especially with Houston coming up. I mean, obviously, we'll know after tonight where they're going to stand after that game. But for me, I've been talking about Lawrence and ball security. And between the two interceptions, I know he had 3 touchdowns, but the 2 interceptions is what's concerning for me. And it's also concerning a lot of people around the area too, because they see him kind of lapsing back into those old habits. Speaking of the Bengals real quick, I mean, Browning, if you remember 2 years ago in 23, he came in around the same time that Lawrence went out, and he carried them to the end of the season. However, they didn't make the playoff that year. They finished 4th in the division, 9-8. So I think, like Shane was saying, or like Kieran was saying, I think they're going to be going to get a quarterback in the next couple of weeks, because, I mean, we could talk for an hour about the Bengals and about how negligent they've been on the O-line and protecting Burrow. But
maybe get to that, because Shane,
yeah.
I think it was you who put the ESPN pass block win rate stats in the doc here, and it's sobering reading. And pass block win rate, just so people understand, the definition is a lineman successfully holding his block for 2.5 seconds, which should be plenty of time particularly for the likes of Joe Burrow to get the ball downfield to someone dangerous. In 2020, the Bengals ranked 29th. In 2021, 30th. 2022, 30th. 2023, 27th, which is the high water mark, quote unquote. 2024, 32nd worst pass block win rate in the league on their O-line in 2024. 2025, 28th so far. This team, like to Kieran Boyle's point, has been completely negligent about protecting the most valuable asset that they have on the field, and arguably that any team in the NFL has on the field. And here he goes in the treatment room again.
It's such a shame, because I really don't know what the people organizing this Bengals team were expecting, that this was bound to happen. Something along this line was bound to happen, that Joe Burrow was under threat of a serious injury. Now, was he under threat for getting taken out for 3 months? That's a particularly unlucky injury to take, keeping him out to December. That's a big one. And what's more than that is,
I don't know, Shane, if you saw the clip on game day before the games kicked off. I was watching about 5:30, and Kyle Brandt had an interview with Joe Burrow, and they played it out over a couple of parts over the course of the program. But in one, he showed him the clip of Myles Garrett last week laying him out. Now, that clip's gone viral, and people have seen it millions of times. What they don't see is that Burrow lets that ball go like a nanosecond before he gets absolutely drilled to the turf and completes a 30-yard beauty down the field. That's how brave Joe Burrow is. So it's not like he's getting out of harm's way or doing a Caleb Williams and bailing out of clean pockets at the first sign of any sort of threat. Like, Burrow's going to stand in there and take it. He's an incredibly brave quarterback, and you got to do your duty by this guy and protect him.
I think so. And the problem is now, if you're looking at where Cincinnati are going forward, no matter who's going to be behind that offensive line, they're going to be facing a similar problem. Jake Browning threw 3 interceptions yesterday, and a big part of that was the fact that he didn't have a lot of time to make decisions. Now, the 3 interceptions were on deep passes into a lot of traffic, which probably weren't great decisions. I think they'll probably have to, again, veer away from that type of play. But, I not that I don't have sympathy for the Bengals, because I think the Bengals, there's a lot of talent there and there's a lot of love for them. But they're in a situation now where they started 2-0 in September, which is something they've always struggled to do. And now they're in a struggle to make the wild cards. I think that's where this team are going to be going, unless they somehow become very, very practical in how they use the offense. Now, the flip side to not spending the money on offensive line is, in fairness, unlike the Chiefs, they have playmakers. Jamar Chase took a lot of passes, maybe 10 or 15, maybe 5 or 10 yards in front of the line of scrimmage, and he got a lot of mileage out of it yesterday. He made a lot of plays. The Bengals have the playmakers if they use them correctly. So that's going to be what Jake Browning.
But Shane, you're a Pats fan. You watch Tom Brady throw to receivers that most of us, including you, can't even remember now. There was one Randy Moss. There was a whole bunch of bit part players the rest of the time. Yeah, there was a Wes Welker and a Julian Edelman, but they weren't in the Jamar Chase elite WR1, or they never had Jamar Chase and T. Higgins because they constructed their roster to win.
Oh, no, I agree with you. I 100% agree with, and we were saying this before the season, that if you don't get the offensive line, if you don't try and think fully about what the team needs and just go for the guys who sell jerseys, and it's the same. We have a similar problem in Miami, similar problem with a lot of teams over the years who love going for the big money players, the stars, but forget about the players that actually win you football games. And offensive line is one of them. We look at the Philadelphia Eagles, as Kieran was saying, a team that is stepping over every team to come across them in the league. Why? They got really good players in the offensive line, all across the defense, an area that the Bengals don't have. The Bengals defense as well, by the way, I think for one of the touchdowns the Jags had, the Bengals players were tackling each other, completely missing the player they were supposed to be getting. That's not a good sign either. So, look, the positive for the Bengals is if Jake Browning has proven himself to be serviceable enough that they might be able to find a way to work it if they try and maximize the playmaking ability of their wide receivers. But the problem then again is you need to make sure those passes are complete. If the ball is in there, that the wide receivers and running backs, other players in the backfield have enough room to go forward. And they have to do it in a schedule where they play against a Vikings defense is going to be hungry, a Broncos defense is going to be hungry, the Lions, the Packers, the Steelers, Jets and the Bears might be slightly easier. The Steelers again, all while Joe Burrow is injured. Like, again, it's amazing how the Bengals have managed to fumble this. A 2-0 start in September that they've been so desperate for, yet the battle now is to make the wild cards because Joe Burrow is injured because you haven't protected him correctly. And I seriously think now we have to start talking in the long term. At what point does Joe Burrow decide that actually my career is being wasted here on the banks of the Ohio River and decide that he might need to go elsewhere?
Well, funny you say that, because I was thinking today on my way into work, bold prediction here, Joe Burrow absolutely will win a Super Bowl in his career, but not with the Cincinnati Bengals.
I wouldn't shock me. Genuinely wouldn't shock me.
So real quick at the Bengals, look what they did with Sanders with the contract situation with him and with Hendrickson. I mean, it's not even on the offensive side; it's also on the defensive side. Like Shane said, it's probably not long for Burrow in Cincinnati. I think everybody.
So he's, I said it in the chat earlier, like, Joe Burrow is unfortunately starting to look like this generation of the NFL's Andrew Luck. Like, this guy doesn't want to be counting his regrets and wondering how he never had a shot because he never had a GM who actually put the roster around him to win. You'd like for Burrow to have the Matt Stafford situation and go somewhere that they're actually going to value him and get him to a Super Bowl. But look, let's move on to a guy who has actually won a Super Bowl, Russell Wilson, who turned back the years for the Giants, Kieran. It didn't end, unfortunately, the way it looked like it would at one point, but what a game in Arlington Stadium where the Giants lost to that walk-off field goal from Brandon Aubrey in overtime.
Unbelievable. 450 yards, 30 of 41, 450 yards, 3 touchdowns. It was absolutely, it was end to end. And, we were trying to get to the end of the game, and the 9 o'clock kickoffs were starting, and I was trying to get a job done at home, and I was kind of saying, will this game ever end? It was it was up and down, and you just needed for it to be decided. And I was watching Kieran was ever pessimistic, waiting for the Cowboys to get over the line, and that proved to be the case. I mean, look, there's so much to get through in this game. Starting off with the Dallas Cowboys, I think look, we gave them credit for their first day out against the Eagles for acquitting themselves quite well. If there is such thing as a moral victory, we kind of gave it to Dallas to say, look, they dusted themselves off after the Micah Parsons trade, and there was a lot to be impressed about, and they backed it up again last night. We talked at the start of the season, and we talked a couple of weeks ago, whether they could establish the run with Javonte Williams, and he was excellent last night. Again, he had 97 yards and a touchdown. And if they can get that from him every week with CeeDee Lamb and George Pickens on the outside, they have the formula to be a potent offense. And Dak I thought was really, really good last night. On the other side of the ball, I think the question is, New York for the second week in a row, their defense is after coughing up too many points, and you're wondering, where is this star-studded defense that we expected? And again, on paper, they're generating pressure and they are generating sacks, but they're coughing up yards, they're coughing up touchdowns, and maybe is the problem in the secondary? Is the problem in the is it in the linebacking core? Where is it? Because as I said, they're getting their sacks, they're getting their pressures, but they're not. They're either not getting home often enough or on time, or the yards are coming from somewhere. Maybe it is up the middle with the run game. But I'd be interested to hear Kieran's take on it.
Kieran, I've been trying to give you time to compose your thoughts. Feel for you, buddy. It's a tough one.
In the great words of Eric Cantona, when the seagulls follows you troller, it is because they know the Giants will lose by a field goal. You saw me in the chat yesterday. I called it at about whatever time the game started. I called it 2 hours before the game finished.
I think you called it just before Malik Neighbors reeled in what looked like it was going to be a sensational winning touchdown. You're still like, Cowboys going to win it with a field goal in overtime, and you were right, friends.
I was, because it's what happens. Bad teams find a way to lose. It's what happens. I've seen the script. I've seen Gano do it. I've seen Jake Elliott do it. I've seen Brandon Aubrey do it. I've seen kickers do it for years, and I've seen the Giants lose in every possible heartbreaking way you can possibly imagine. So it's, I expected it more than anything else. And when I was thinking about this game, I almost went through the alphabet to kind of outline the problems and the issues I had with this team. From A, I hear, B is Bowen, C is crap. So I could have gone the whole way down, but I mean, there's so many issues with this team. I don't know why why Hudson is on the team. Apparently he has a 2-year, $12 million contract. Who would have thought that? So there's one problem with the Giants. I mean, that whole string of penalties was just incredible.
That's sensational play where the Giants managed not only to have 4 defensive penalties on the one play, but luckily for them, it was negated by CeeDee Lamb taunting in the end zone, which otherwise would have resulted in a Cowboys touchdown, which might have meant that it didn't even get to overtime in the first place. But man, that's
the issues.
It's inexcusable.
The issues are everywhere. I mean, when Shane and Dable came in, it was a big fanfare. They gave a lot of hope to a lot of fans, but it's the same old story with the Giants. We talk about the strong teams and the good teams in the league. Look at the Eagles. Look at that O-line. I mean, it's absolutely stacked. That's where you start. I mean, my son plays 10U football. That's where the game starts. It starts with the O-line. You build and you start the game from there and you go forward. And the Giants, just like the Bengals, they've been negligent, and they've been derelict in their duty in not only with helping Daniel Jones in his career, but right now they just haven't put together an O-line. Andrew Thomas was out again. They paid a truckload of money to him, and he probably won't be healthy for much of the year. Evan Neal is a bust. I mean, that's just what it is. The O-line itself is in pieces. And like Kieran said about the defense, the defense has got some great names up front, the top 4, but they're wafer thin in the linebacker core. We lost Micah McFadden last week, and you saw the secondary. I mean, Bowen, I don't think Bowen is long for this team right now, especially the heat that the defense took yesterday. I mean, to play prevent with 51 seconds left and invite the Cowboys onto you and just get chunk yard after chunk yard after chunk yard. And we all knew Aubrey. I mean, Aubrey's the best kicker in the league. There's no wind in there. We all knew he was going to nail that. So it's the problems for the Giants are everywhere. Dable, I mean, where do you go from here? I mean, the Chiefs. So guess what? The Chiefs get humbled by the Eagles, and guess who the Chiefs have next week? The Get Right Game, the GRG. Perfect sign for the Chiefs.
I saw a new. There's a new take as well on the Micah Parsons trade. I saw a fan saying that the Cowboys are wasting the prime years of Brandon Aubrey by trading Micah Parsons.
No, right. Like I was going to say, Shane Brennan, Cormac Coughlin, our resident Office Falcons fan, said today, Brandon Aubrey is the most dangerous man in football. Like, he's unbelievable. That's a 64-yard boot to send it to overtime. And Brian O'Leary's taking the night off this evening. I hope you're having a good one, Brian. And you better be watching us, by the way. But Brian was saying earlier when we were chatting, like, the new kickoff rule where you advance the touchback 5 further yards, which gives offenses a much better starting position than has ever been the case. Or if you decide to run the ball out, I guess you take your chances. But if you're starting at the 35, Brandon Aubrey can kick a 64-yard field goal. You don't need to be producing an awful lot of offense on every drive to put yourself in scoring position. And most teams now would expect their kicker, like a 50 to 55-yard field goal now is not a gimme, but teams are expecting guys to make those, 5 or 6 times out of 8.
The gas thing is, you see the kick they put, was it to win or to, no, it was to tie the game at the end. It was behind the star. That's how far back he was. The star in the middle of the field is on the other side of it. And what an incredible weapon to have on your team. And we see as well around the league, like yesterday, that kickers let a lot of teams down in a lot of key moments. And to have Brandon Aubrey there, it's stunning. And it was really interesting as well to hear his story that he was a soccer player. He had no interest in following football or following becoming a kicker until his wife was like, come on, you may as well give this a go. And now he's the best long range kicker in the league. But I got to focus on the Cowboys here for a second, because I was watching back some of the tape with their defensive play, because I think so much of the talk now, so much of the hype, I think, is naturally going to be on Russell Wilson. Oh, he's bringing back deep play passing to New York. He was able to get those things. Obviously, the Malik Neighbors catch was just incredible. If in doubt, always draft an LSU wide receiver. That seems to be the trick to getting nice offensive play. But I think a lot of questions have to be asked as to the Cowboys defense, and there's a lot lacking here. I think Eberflus hasn't quite gotten to grips yet as to what he wants his defense to do, particularly when it comes to.
Can I call out something, and I'm going to credit where this came from, because it was Connor Orr who pointed this out on the Heat to Call podcast earlier. Like, Matt Eberflus is the coach who allowed the Hail Mary to happen last year, that reignited the Commander season and doomed the Bears season last year. There is literally only one Giants player on the field that you absolutely have to have accounted for in that play, and he lets them run away with a potential game winner again.
Yeah, but the thing is about that, I look at that and I look at a lot of other plays. I think the two of the deep touchdowns that Russell Wilson threw, and the big thing is there's the Cowboys players and they're talking to each other and there's communication, but there's confusion. And that's a big thing, particularly when it comes to the linebackers and the secondary. I don't really think they know what they're doing. They're like, there's 2 players that should have been on. Malik Neighbors there didn't cover, similar to the first touchdown as well. They're all right getting the pressure on. We see that their line play was sort of held up against Philadelphia in week 1, but once the ball is in the air going 10 yards past the line of scrimmage, I think they're not organized enough. They don't know whether they're marking. I think sometimes they get confused as to whether it's zone or man defense based on some of the analysis I was reading earlier today. I think that's a big question mark that the Cowboys need to answer. Fair play to them. They got the victory. I think Dak Prescott could take, his stock is definitely rising after this game as well. As is George Pickens, who had a couple of key plays. You can definitely see as to why they traded for him. But no, I think this Cowboys defense has got some team is going to come in and ask them a lot of questions. I know they're going to get blown out pretty soon. And I think at that point, we're going to see that this Cowboys defense mightn't be all that it's cracked up to be, despite the fact that they are 1-1.
Well, we'll talk about the Dolphins defense and how the Patriots took advantage of it after a quick break.
Great odds, you're in control, you always bet responsibly, and you're not afraid to choose alternatives. That's why you bet with QuinnBet. Build your own unique football bets with Create a Bet. Winning team, first goal scorer, number of goals, the possibilities are endless. And with a 4-star Trustpilot customer service rating, why not give Quinbet a shot? Quinbet, we bet you love it.
All right, Kieran O'Donovan, you've been calling it since the start of the season, and that seat is only getting hotter under Mike McDaniel at Miami because they dropped their home opener against the Patriots. Yeah, they were much improved on the shellacking they got from the Indianapolis Colts the previous week, but the Dolphins can't defend. Tua seems to be out of sorts. They just can't do anything right.
Yeah, there was a moment there where Tua tried to connect with Tyreek Hill, and it was just so far away from a completion that I think Tyreek Hill gestured to the sideline as if to say, just get him out of here. The vibe is not good. It's just not good in Miami, and I know I've been harping on and on about it. But look, on a positive side, there was, as you said, there was a lot more production too. Tyreek Hill did have a 100-yard game. It was 109 yards he went for, and they put up 27 points. It's not a bad scoring, but They lost their first game. I think they've won the last 4 against the Patriots. The Patriots broke that losing streak. And the Dolphins, the bad thing for the Dolphins is I believe they have to go in and face the Bills next. Am I right? We can call it now. They're going to be 0-3 unless it's an absolute miracle. So he's absolutely, it's the hottest coaching seat in football at the moment. On the other side of the ball, I'd like to take my own focus away from the Dolphins for one week. And I have to say I was impressed with what I saw from the Patriots. And I know, look, when you're watching Red Zone, you're kind of, I haven't had a chance to watch this full game back. But just looking at it on paper and looking at some of the highlights last night on Red Zone, Drake May threw some beautiful passes. He great touchdown pass to Kayshon Boutte. Mac Hollins got a catch in the end zone. May got the ball to 9 receivers, so there was 9. He really spread the ball around the field. You Ramondre Stevenson accounted for a huge yardage, but if you add up his receiving yards and rushing yards, and you had I think it was an 80 or 90 yard punt return. So the Patriots are showing a really, really balanced and really potent attack, and they can, obviously they can beat you in special teams as well, with that extra weapon. And
I don't think, by the way, and I'd love to know if it's ever happened before. I certainly don't ever remember seeing a punt returned for a touchdown and then the responding kickoff also returned for a touchdown. Like 2 kickoff returns back to back by the opposing team's special teams unit. That is pretty special stuff, pun intended.
Have you never played Madden when
I bet the Giants did it. I bet it happened to the Giants.
We used to have a rule in our house. We had to stop. You could only do an onside kick when you were losing the match because it led to fisticuffs at home. If you were like 21 points up at least, and you're there thinking, I'm going to get the ball back at least, and next thing you see a sneaky onside kick. But I digress. But yeah, look, I was more impressed with the Patriots, and I'm not going to be too hard on the Dolphins. It wasn't a shambolic performance by them, but it still did. They dug their hole a little bit deeper, and they're in real trouble this season. And I think maybe they do at some point start the tank and start clearing out and see what they can get for the likes of Tyreek Hill. All jokes aside about his legal battles, because the Chiefs will take him if they think that he's got something to offer still. So you could see any combination of outcomes there in Miami, but certainly not. I cannot see them, putting any kind of a comeback together this season.
Shane, it was the first win of the Mike Vrabel era for your Patriots, and he looked really happy about it. You see him literally sprinting down the sideline in support of Gibson as he returned that interception.
Yeah, it was amazing. I should see how fast he ran. I'd love to know, did he run faster than Nick Sirianni threw his flag? I think there were next-gen stats on both of them flying around somewhere. It would be interesting. Look, I come away from this game slightly negative on both teams defensively speaking. I felt like this is a bit more like watching an entertaining Division 4 GA match between Carlo and Wicklow, and somehow Carlo managed to not bottle it as much as Wicklow bottled it, because there was a lot of areas in this. The Dolphins should have won this match, by the way. Devon Achane had a run against very little tackling and bad coverage that went all the way to the end zone. He got unlucky, or just bad spatial awareness, that his foot ended up hitting the sideline, which meant that they had to go to 4 downs from, I think, around 25 yards out. And then what happened in the subsequent drive was this terrible game management, which I think is putting a lot of pressure back on Mike McDaniel, in that there was a moment when the clock, they hadn't it's on the second down. I think they hadn't quite figured out what they wanted to do yet, and had to burn a timeout because they hadn't set up for the play, which is definitely not how you run a 2-minute offense. Bad mark on Tua, bad mark on Mike McDaniel. On the Patriots side of things, though, I think we could definitely be proud of, be happy with Ramondre Stevenson for a start. He's somebody who struggled to fit into the team last year, had a lot of drops, was very good as both a pass weapon and a run weapon yesterday. The offensive line, I think, when they're not giving away a lot of silly penalties, and there was a lot of frustrating penalties from the offensive line, when they were disciplined, they managed to play relatively well. Drake May had a couple of really, really sweet passes, including the touchdown, I think, to Stevenson, and there's another one as well. And to Kieran's point about the amount of different receivers that the Patriots are passing to, it's an unusual one because most quarterbacks have their guy. Yeah, their number one guy that they always trust. It's Chase in Cincinnati. It's Kelsey for Patrick Mahomes. Drake May hasn't found that person yet. And I don't know whether that's a good thing or a bad thing that he hasn't. It was Hunter Henry for a while. He's definitely spreading the love a bit. A lot of wide receivers getting action. So, look, the only way is up for the Patriots. I think defensively there is a lot of work to be done here. If that was against a team with any sort of competence, the Patriots would have lost that game. I think it was the Dolphins, when they had momentum, just bottled it near the end. And despite the fact that in the second half, when they had momentum, the Dolphins offensively looked pretty good. Tua was passing the ball well, and Tyreek Hill in particular was getting a lot of room. So a lot of work for both of these teams. But yeah, I agree. When I think Thursday Night Football is when the Dolphins go up to Buffalo, that seems to me like it's going to be a bloodbath by the Niagara Falls, and it could very well be Mike McDaniel's last game as head coach of the Miami Dolphins.
But Kieran Boyle, the way this division is shaping up, and it's actually pretty much as I think we mostly predicted at the start of the season, there is actually quite a glittering opportunity in front of the Patriots here if they get it together, because the Dolphins are headed nowhere good. The Bills look like they're going to mop up all around them. The Jets dropped to 0-2 with Justin Fields injured now. There's a gap there for a team that wants to go for a wild card place, and it's got the Patriots' name on it right now.
Yeah, and I have the Patriots making the wild card, so that's I enjoyed the win. I think they labored a little bit. I will give Miami credit for coming back into it a little bit and making it competitive. I mean, Tua did have a decent stat board, 26 of 32 for 315 and 2 touchdowns. That's a good return for a day's work in the NFL. But it was just a little bit too late. I mean, the damage was done early. The Patriots just imposed their will on them early. The Miami didn't look like they were really interested in the first half. Maybe it was the 110-degree weather, and they were thinking about Sunday night on Collins Avenue and getting some bar service, etc. But no, they I will give the Dolphins credit for making it a competitive game. But
I like the way you paused before you got to bar service there. As about three other less appropriate options scroll through your mind.
I was going through the old Rolodex. All right, I had to stop early. But yeah, the Patriots, as one of my wild card picks, I was glad that they won, and I will be looking out for them. And I think I did say last week that their offense would wake up. I don't think they woke up a huge amount, but they got enough to get 33 points. So, spreading the ball out, Diggs was out there. I think they're still missing on defense is my man Christian Gonzalez, and he might not be back till week 3. But when he gets back, they're going to be a much different proposition, especially on defense. But I like this Patriots team. Similar, there's Ben Watson's out there. There's old school kind of Patriot names out there, and they're not flashy names, but they're making plays. And the Patriots are going to start stacking wins soon because we'll probably get to the Jets a little bit later. But Dolphins, the only thing I can say is they didn't fold and they made it competitive. And they made it not a whitewash down in South Florida.
Well, we won't get to the Jets just yet, but we will go to the much maligned Jets of the South per Kieran Boyle, the Falcons, who actually went to M&T Bank Stadium and upended the Vikings last night. Kieran O'Donovan, Bijan Robinson, the star there. I mean, this guy can do it all.
Yeah, before we get to that, just a comment there from Sky. She checked and it was the second time that a punt return was followed by a kick return. Deion Sanders and Desmond Howard in 1992. So I enjoyed reading that. That was Atlanta and Washington. So nice bit of history there from Sky. Thanks for that. But yeah, it was absolutely the Bijan Robinson show. And you guys have called it that Bijan. I mean, I think you were lamenting last week that he's a guy that you feel sorry for being on the team he's on. That he's absolutely carrying the team on his shoulders. But I saw an interview with Saquon Barkley during the week where he was saying that nobody cuts in the league like Bijan Robinson, and that's coming from a guy with a fairly decent wrinkle himself. So he was absolutely class. Like every time they needed him, he rushed for 143. He had a good chunk of yards receiving. And look, Michael Penix didn't have to set the world on fire. He didn't have to do a whole pile late on in the game. They just put it all on Bijan's back. But I will say for Michael Penix Jr., he did spread the ball around early when he had to. And you saw nice cameos from Jake London, Kyle Pitts, Darnell Mooney getting in on the action. So I'm not as low on the Falcons as you guys have been. I'm not as down on them as you guys have been. And the thing that I would that would give me great hope for this Falcons team, or maybe a little bit more hope. I'm not saying they're going to win the Super Bowl or anything, but both of those rookies got in on the action. So Jalen Walker and James Pierce, and that's what they wanted to improve in the draft. They had six sacks and 5 tackles for a loss. So I give them credit. They seem to have addressed an issue there. And if they can keep going with that production, then they are going to make a fight of this NFC South. And just the last stat I'll throw out is I have never seen a QBR in single digit ratings before. And JJ McCarthy he had a 6.2 out of 100 QBR rating last night. So really, really tough night at the office for him. And it looks like he's going to have a bit of an injury to recover from as well. Unfortunately, it's his appearance in Dublin might be cast in doubt. So we hope that he recovers on time, because we were all very impressed with him last week. He's still technically, I think we can say that he's a rookie. He's in his first season as a starter. We can write off last year. So you're going to have days like that, like he had yesterday, and you'd hope that he can bounce back from it as a young guy who seems to say the right things and do the right things. But a night to forget for JJ.
Well, let's get to JJ Kieran Boyle, a guy who we like and obviously would want to see do well, as you want to see every rookie quarterback do well and have their chance to shine. My heart went out to him last night, I have to say, because he's a new father, and I can remember 11 days after my daughter was born, doing a best man speech at a wedding. And I don't know if you've ever seen Old School, when Will Ferrell is in the debate against Jimmy Carville, and he wins the debate, and afterwards he goes, "I blacked out. What happened?" So that's what it felt like. I know I gave a best man speech. I believe it was good because I got good feedback afterwards. I couldn't tell you anything about what was in it, because you're in the absolute cement mixer. JJ McCarthy went and played a football game in that zone, and so he probably doesn't even remember it himself. And that's just as well, because it was one to forget, and it's still very early in his career. And in a weird way, that final quarter against the Bears probably didn't help him, because it really turned the hype fader up to 11 very, very quickly for him. And it was only one quarter of football. Like, the 3 quarters that preceded it weren't great. And unfortunately for him, none of the 4 quarters last night were anything to write home about.
No, and what people forget is he's a rookie. This was his second game in the league, and he's going to have games like this, and he's going to have more games like this. I mean, Peyton Manning had stinkers like this. Eli had some stinkers. Brett Favre. You've got to go through these things. It's like when you start a new job, you make some mistakes, and you have to feel your way through, and you learn from your mistakes, and that's what's going on right now. I got to say, I thought that he was going to start a little better in the league, just purely because of the weapons behind him, and obviously that Vikings defense. But again, you have to remember he is still a rookie, and he's still making his bones in the league. So, and the fact that, like you said, he's a new father, so he's probably slept about 4 hours in the last week or whatever, whenever the kid came. But it's a tough one. It's like I said, I really hope he's back for the Dublin game, because that would be a shame if he was to miss that one. But it's tough for rookie quarterbacks, especially now. This kid, you got to remember, this kid is not used to losing. He won everything in high school, he won in college, or he won in high school, and he won the national championship in college with Michigan. So he's not used to it. So these are the times that you learn. That's what I tell the kids at 10U football. You learn more by losing. So you've got to you're going to learn these lessons that come along, and he's going to be the better for it. But what I would be concerned for is the kind of the frame of mind of people like Justin Jefferson, who only had 81 yards last year. He was feasting with Darnold last year. So you got to let's keep an eye on that over the next couple of weeks. See how Jefferson's temperament is when he.
So it was also like and we'll get to Daniel Jones' performance in week 2 for the Colts and the season he's already starting to put together in Indianapolis. But let's not forget that Daniel Jones was in Minnesota and they let him go. They bet the farm on JJ McCarthy. They could have had Aaron Rodgers there if they'd wanted. There were lots of other options that weren't JJ McCarthy, or it would have given him another season to learn while sitting on the bench. And Kevin O'Connell and the Brains Trust in Minnesota decided not to go with them. So they're under pressure too. And the whole offensive, it wasn't just JJ McCarthy that was out of sorts last night. Like, not much was working on that side of the ball. Like, the script for the last 2 weeks for the Vikings has been to lean on that Brian Flores defense to hold them in the game, which it did for the most part brilliantly last night, because the Falcons were running all over them. Bijan was going riot, but they kept stalling them in the red zone and forcing them to settle for field goals, kept them in the game way longer than their performance otherwise would have justified.
Yeah, I mean, it's like I said, it's if anybody knows quarterback talent, it's going to be O'Connell. So he's going to stick to it. He's going to stick with his man for this season at least. So I mean, I don't see any changes coming up right now. But I gotta say, it wasn't a great game to watch. Not a hugely entertaining game with the Jots. I call them the Jots, the Jets of the South, JOTS. But they did enough. I mean, they kind of had those periods last year where they worked on both sides, and when they were firing with Drake London and Pitts, and then when the defense was kicking in, they did that yesterday. I mean, they may surprise. The Jots might surprise some people this year.
Well, just wait till they win in a wild card game and Jots becomes a thing, and they'll all be wearing Jots t-shirts, and you'll be taking it to the bank with the. I hope you got the intellectual property on that one, that you trademarked that one. Shane Brennan, just a word on Kieran O'Donovan touched on it earlier. That Falcons defense, which, give Terry Fontenot, the GM, his flowers there, because he went heavily on the defensive side of the ball. A lot of people were questioning why they traded up and went back into the first round to get the second defensive player. Not only those two got, but the guy who got the pick was a 4th round defensive back that they took in last year's draft as well. He put all the chips on that side of the table, so that's where we need to get better. The Falcons' pass rush, or lack thereof, has been called out as their massive glaring weakness for the last couple of seasons, and it looks like it's well on the way to being addressed.
Yeah, and schematically as well, I don't think you can really fault anything that the Falcons did last night. As much as we talk about the Vikings not looking very blunted on offense because of the quarterback play, their run offense went absolutely nowhere. Jordan Mason attempted 9 carries, got 30 overall. Aaron Jones not doing much better. And you could see, when I was rewatching it this morning as well, that I think one of the big things is when you have a lot of these young defensive players, it's difficult to get them all singing in tune. But like, when one of the big problems JJ McCarthy faced is that actually he felt like he didn't have so many options to throw to, because I think the Falcons were just set up really, really strongly. So yeah, no, I think the Falcons could take a lot of credit on this. And just on the Vikings side, the only thing I will say, it is unusual for JJ McCarthy that his first 2 games as an NFL quarterback have both been in prime time. I think that's going to take a little while. Like I said as well, he did also become a father this week as well. Give him a bit of time. I hope to see him playing in Dublin, mainly because I already have an article written about the oldest quarterback in the league playing against the youngest quarterback in the league. I don't have to throw that out, but no. So
when Aaron Rodgers goes down with an injury and neither of those 2 quarterbacks are playing in Dublin, we all know who to blame for the jinx.
The curse of the Indo strikes again.
Kieran O'Donovan, I mentioned Danny Dimes briefly earlier there. He backed up the hype from week 1, went 23 of 34 for 316 yards with both a passing and a rushing touchdown for the 2nd week in a row as the Colts went into Mile High and took down the Broncos. I know there was a lot more to that game than just how Daniel Jones played, but the Colts are 2-0.
Yeah, and if I find myself having to jump off the Bengals bandwagon, I think I might jump straight on the Colts one at some point this season, because they're a fascinating story, and they're a team that I did not, I don't know that I picked them to finish last in the division or second last, but they've started off, really, really well, and Daniel Jones has been, a really hot commodity in the first 2 weeks, and I don't know, was it you or Brian Connor, said to temper expectations because David Carr looked like the MVP after 2 weeks last year, and that didn't quite pan out. So again,
that's right. The Saints award for peaking early could be going to them, or the Cardinals. We'll give that to the Cardinals.
Yeah, absolutely. So again, look, there's a long season ahead, but look, I mean, they they looked absolutely star-studded on offense at times. And I think that, look, the team is going to go through whatever you say about Daniel Jones. They do have two absolute bona fide stars in Jonathan Taylor in the backfield and Tyler Warren. And it's not, I know Tyler Warren's a rookie, but it's not a shock or a surprise because, listening to Kieran and listening to a lot of people at the, before the draft, it's no surprise. And Tyler Warren looks like this year's Brock Bowers. He was, he looks absolutely top quality. And on it was a good back and forth game as well. And on the Broncos side of the ball, I don't think they necessarily played a bad game. It was just a decent game to watch. Bo Nix, I thought, played better yesterday than he had the week before. But again, it's funny that loss. It kind of it gives the Chiefs good hope again at the start of the season. It's a kind of a gimme to the Chiefs, and it gives opportunities then to Vegas and the Chargers to take control of the division as well. So we've said an awful lot. This AFC West it's going to be a division that's going to keep us intrigued, I think, all the way through the season. But the Colts definitely in week 2, they're proving so far that they could have a real say in the AFC South as well. So just an entertaining game to watch.
Kieran Boyle, what did you see from Tyler Warren? It's intriguing how Shane Steichen uses him all over the formation. He wants to give this kid as many chances as possible to shine and to get as many touches on the ball, and that is a smart thing to do because he is so talented.
Oh, he's a unicorn. I mean, you can put him up as in the fullback position. You could line him up in linebacker, and he's a great pass catching tight end like you saw yesterday. 79 yards, real nice return. But I need to apologize because I was unfamiliar with the Colts game. I really was. I didn't see this coming. Jonathan Taylor, 165 on 25 carries, complementing the passing game with Warren. It's what I will temper, like we said earlier on, the Saints. They scored 40 points in 2 consecutive games to start the season last year. We know how that ended. I'd like to think the Colts have a little bit more talent than the Saints had last year, but still, it's. I know Jones has been balling and he's been shooting darts left, right, and center, but I just can't trust it just yet. I've seen it in the past. I can see when it comes off the rails, but right now, I mean, they're firing on every single cylinder possible. Everything's going their way. They're just. I mean, Taylor had 165 yards on the ground yesterday. It's a massive return for a running back in the league right now, and that's against the Broncos defense. And I thought the Broncos were going to manhandle him, push him around, but. It's a testament to what's going on right now. I mean, you can't tell in this league. I mean, none of us, I don't think, had the Colts starting the way they did. And again, I'm going to temper it with the fact that it's week 2, but I still think in the regions of week 3 or even week 4, there's a Daniel Jones game coming up, and I think it's going to pump the brakes on a lot of people's expectations. But right now, no turnovers. I mean, the Colts haven't even punted yet. They just score on damn near every drive. And then all the luck is going their way that they win a game because of a leverage call. So everything's going the Colts' way. I'm not ready to announce that they're a wild card spot yet because they've still got the Jags and the Texans in that division to deal with. But I mean, you can't fault the start. I just would, for me, the Broncos yesterday, I like the way Knicks play. I just think they got away from the run game a little too fast yesterday. Dobbins played pretty well at the start to establish the run. They got too heavy. Do you remember last year when they were playing the Bengals in that game and they just got way too pass heavy? A little similar to that yesterday. They got away from it. They didn't get Dobbins the ball or even Harvey. I think Harvey only had eight yards yesterday with the ball. But Colts, I mean, give them their credit. I mean, they're 2-0. They haven't put a foot wrong, but there are cloudy skies in the horizon.
And Shane, as Kieran was saying, we shouldn't get too carried away with the Colts. We're not making the America's game as they lift the Lombardi just yet. But the Broncos didn't help their own cause. And Kieran touched on it there. It's a brutal special teams penalty to give away where the Colts were facing a 60-yard field goal, which ultimately was missed only for a leverage penalty, which is the one where you use another player to jump in the air to try and block a field goal, which you're not allowed to do. You can jump up under your own steam, fair enough, but you cannot, make a back on somebody else to get up there. That's a 15-yard penalty. That makes for a very makeable 45-yard field goal, and they lose the game.
Yeah, it's one of those things that I think some Broncos fans were calling out, or not happy with the call afterwards. But look, it is what it is. My big thing for this is, I think, as much as we're talking about Daniel Jones and Jonathan Taylor and all the rest of the Colts offense, I think we have to look at the battle between Bo Nix's offense and the Colts defense, and that's actually being what really won the game. For most of the second half, Denver were held scoreless, and there was a lot of key aspects. I mean, Denver were outplayed in yards, in passing yards, in rushing yards, in yards per play. Bo Nix had a lot of passes that didn't, once they got into receivers' hands, it didn't really go anywhere. The run game wasn't particularly ecstatic. And I don't know how much of that we could really attribute to the Broncos having a slow start. They weren't exactly fantastic against the Tennessee Titans a couple weeks ago. Whereas I think this Colts defense were pumped for this game, were ready for this game, were well planned, and I think they were really motivated to go in and make a difference and make those key game changers. How long this will last, I don't know, but it's still long enough for me to see if I could throw this up. There we go. There's Indiana Jones. I might have went slightly overboard with the music on this morning's instant reaction, but no. For me, I think the bigger takeaway from this is questions about the Denver offense and their inability to get key third downs when they need to. Really get Bo Nix running and confident. Make sure that those wide receivers are making the plays that they were able to make last year. There's 2 games in a row that they haven't done it. This is a game that Denver should have had sealed up near the end of the third quarter. They didn't, not because their defense couldn't hold Indianapolis. Indiana didn't score a touchdown in the second half. They didn't do it because they couldn't get enough passes and the runs going in the second half. I think their offense really needs to improve further we go into the season.
I tell you, Kieran Donovan, whose offense looks like it's made a significant improvement from week 1 to week 2, is the Detroit Lions. Yay! Who dropped 52 points on the Bears.
Yeah, they very much reminded everybody that they're still here. They're not going anywhere for now, and that week 1 was very much a wake up call for them. I won't quite go out on a limb and say that it was all because of the Packers' greatness just yet, but no, look, at the very start, like this game started off like it might be an absolute classic. It might be a shootout. It was up and down and up and down, and then the Bears turned the ball over. There was a really poor Caleb Williams interception where he was scrambling and he decided to throw the ball up the line. Looks like he threw it into no man's land. They turned the ball over twice, and then the Lions just kept pounding the pressure on, and the Lions just went back to what they do best. I mean, they went back to Jahmyr Gibbs. He rushed for 94 yards. He had another bunch of yards receiving, and 3 touchdown passes to Amon-Ra St. Brown. They just hit their stars. Sam Laporta got in the action. Another highlight catch from Isaac TeSlaa. I've mentioned him a few times. He's my one to watch this year, and he's going to be more and more of a weapon for them as the season goes on, I think. But on the Bears side of things, I guess with all the hope before the season about the Ben Johnson Caleb Williams marriage, it's definitely not. It's one that's stuttering to get off the ground. And I'm no quarterback expert or anything like that, but it just seems to me that Caleb Williams he's too anxious to get into the off schedule stuff, and he's not inclined to just relax, read the field, and hit the number one. He seems to want to do something special every time he has the ball, and that's just not going to fly. You have to get your bread and butter sorted before you go off schedule and try to play hero ball. I mean, he's got the weapons. He connected well with Odunze a couple of times. Throughout the game.
This is an interesting point that you're touching on there, because we saw Rome Odunze go for 7 for 128 and 2 touchdowns. We saw DeAndre Swift running at one stage for, I think he was around 6 yards a carry, 5-6 yards a carry. So they were getting the running game going. Ben Johnson can scheme receivers open all day long. The Bears weren't playing a defense at the caliber of the Vikings. And to your point, I think it was 2nd and 21. It was a drive that was going nowhere. And Caleb Williams decides to strap on the Superman coach at just the wrong time. This is something that Ben Johnson talked about in the offseason, which was, when it's time to be Superman, go and be Superman, but it's not time to be Superman all the time. And his decision-making in those moments is concerning. And it's redolent, unfortunately, of what the Bears did to Justin Fields. And I don't know how much of it is Caleb and how much of it was playing in the Shane Waldron offense last year and playing in a dysfunctionally coached team last year. That will take time to fix. I was as negative as anybody about Caleb in week 1 and about the lack of any discernible progress in weeks 1 and 2. I will temper that by saying the Bears have, over the first 2 weeks of the season, played teams that won a combined 29 games last year. These are actually 2 of the best teams in the NFL. They're well-drilled units. The way the Lions played as well, and we'll get to the lack of fight that the Bears showed at times, but the way the Lions played, it was personal. Like, they really wanted to lay the wood, and they really wanted to stomp the Bears. Like, you saw them doing the stumble bum celebration. We know that this is what the play was called because Jared Goff talked about it in the Netflix documentary Quarterback in the offseason, the play where he faked the stumble last year, which was a Ben Johnson play, and they threw a touchdown against the Bears. The defense, after that pick, do the stumble bum celebration in the end zone. They recreate that play like they did. They went out of their way to embarrass Ben Johnson and to embarrass the Bears. Ben Johnson was asked about it in the press conference, Dan Campbell going for it in 4th down and going for a touchdown when they could have settled for a field goal and the game was long won. He wanted to pour it on, and Ben Johnson, I thought, took it in the right way. But if the Bears don't look at that and want to put in the work on the training ground and avoid that ever happening again, it's what happens next week, and they don't exactly have an easy game when they play the Cowboys next week. If you're going to stand for a team taunting you openly like that because you can't do anything about it, then you're like, what are you about as a professional football player? And you don't address that by putting clever posts on Instagram or by commentary on media. You address that by putting in the work on the training ground, getting the silent countdown, shutting down the penalties, getting tight in coverage. Caleb Williams working on his footwork and working on his release and working on his progressions and not playing hero ball. And that's where it has to start now for the Bears. There will be easier games than they face going into Ford Field, but the benchmark now has to be, when the Lions come to Soldier Field, what are you going to do? Are you going to take a backward step, or are you going to show what you're really made of? That's my manifesto.
There we go. But just going back to the Bears, the point about the points that we were making about Tyler Warren, okay, and how incredible he's been. Colson Loveland was only targeted once last night, and like a good tight end, I think is your safety valve, and it just leads me to question. And you live a keener eye on the Bears games. You probably watched that full game last night, and I'm just wondering, Was Colson Loveland getting open? Was it a case that Caleb, his eyes are too far down the field, or is he struggling to separate early doors, because he's another highly touted? Wasn't he taken before Tyler Warren? Am I right in saying that? So
the Bears had that choice and they opted for Loveland.
They opted for him. So look, where that proves to be a mistake is another option. And on the taunting, Ben Johnson had, he was well able to give it as well. I think in one of his first conferences he said he looked forward to beating Matt LaFleur twice a year. So he's got to be ready to back that up, as you said, on the and his team and his players need to get behind it.
It's funny because I saw people coming at him for that on social media, like, but he's just taken over as coach. Like, he wants to get the fan base fired up.
Yeah. And there's
he wrote a check, and it's up to his players to go and catch them.
Yeah, I don't see an issue with it. But again, you do take a certain risk when you don't want to be eating those words in a few weeks' time. And like, there is, I still think they're talented enough, and I think Ben Johnson is a consummate enough professional to recover from this and to improve from this. And again, we talk about overreaction Monday after week 1. I mean, there can be an overreaction Monday after week 2 as well. There's a long season to go, and the Bears can definitely, they have the talent on the field to right the wrongs as well.
Kieran Boyle, though, the Lions, after the week 1 recriminations when they went down without really swinging a punch against the Packers, like, they looked like they're able to do everything that they were able to do last year, particularly the Sonic and Knuckles, your two favorites. That running game is ominously good.
Yeah, and you knew they were going to explode. I mean, he took that personally. He was seething all week after the week 1 performance. He was just waiting, counting the days down till that home game in Ford Field, and he knew he was going to erupt and just unleash the weapons on the Bears. And the Bears were the victim last night. Just an awesome display of weaponry everywhere. I mean, just everyone lit up. It was like fireworks all over the place. I mean, even Jared Goff threw for 5 touchdowns, 334 yards. But you could see everybody was happy. Everybody was, relieved that the stink of week 1 had come off. But it's just that when that, like I said, I haven't really, and we talked about it, in the last weeks and months, I haven't been really concerned about Detroit on the field. I don't think there's been any real concern for me. We've talked about the coaches changes and all that kind of stuff, and Aaron Glenn is going to have his own problems in Jetland, but I've never really been doubting the quality on the field, and it showed yesterday. They were all just clicking. Sonic and Knuckles and Amon-Ra St. Brown, even Branch in defense. It was like an all-star cast yesterday. The Lions came out to play, and the Bears were the unfortunate victims. But, Campbell was just waiting and licking his lips and licking his chops for this game last night. He just wanted to just go out there and destroy. It didn't matter if it was the Bears, the Jots, the Jets, whoever was out there, he was going to run it up, and he took pride in that. And like Johnson said, that's what Campbell does. He runs the score up. He's not going to take his foot off. That's what he did when he said at the opening press conference, he's going to bite your knees. He's going to put his foot in your throat, and that's exactly what they did. And then when you all those weapons, and then like Kieran said, you throw in this kid Tesla from Arkansas. I mean, he just looks like an absolute beast out there, just hungry for the ball all the time. But an awesome display by the Lions. We love watching the Lions play, except for you, Connor. But it's great.
I love watching the Lions when they're not playing.
They're not playing the Bears, exactly. But it was a great game to watch. Offense all over the place. Players at the prime, just having fun out there and putting a big score up. And Detroit are back, and I didn't doubt it for a second.
Shane, final word to you. It does make for, yet again, a very interesting looking NFC North this year, alongside the AFC West, as Kieran called out earlier, one of the more intriguing divisions.
Yeah, firstly, the Lions definitely put me back on my box. I backed the Bears to win this one, and I was sort of delivering my overreaction Monday on the Lions that they were cooked, but of course they were indeed not cooked. I am, and fair play to the Lions. They showed themselves to be the good team. I think most of us had the confidence they were. I think it'd be interesting. I think history will show the full light as to what extent last week's game against the Packers was just the Packers being an excellent team, where the Lions were just coming into the season cold in week one, as happens to a lot of teams. I was very impressed by the Packers on Thursday Night Football as well. I think that this is going to make the NFC North, depending on what the Vikings do, of course, but that battle between the Lions and the Packers is going to be incredible. And every week that they're going to be playing against it, they still have some relatively tough. They've got a tougher run of it, both teams, than they did last year in terms of their schedules. That's going to be great. The only point I will make, though, in terms of as what we talked about earlier about Caleb Williams, I'll be honest, out of all the games that we've spoken about today, this is the one I've had the least amount of time to look in depth, but I was still not seeing enough that Caleb Williams just annoyed me, because so many times he just tried to force the ball down the field. You could tell it was going off script. You could tell it wasn't what was in the plan. You could tell it wasn't what the scheme was. And with all the quarterbacks in the league who are great improvisers but are successful, they're successful because they improvise within a great scheme that they stick to more often than not. And when they need to improvise, then they trust their guys to do it. Same with Justin Fields a couple of years ago. I think the same is happening with Caleb Williams. There's a lot of improvisation first, scheme second, and that's not the way. I think Ben Johnson's going to really have to step up or sort of lay down the law a lot more with Caleb Williams when it comes to that, because you flip that to what Jared Goff was able to do, and the Lions offense were incredibly efficient. Jared Goff only threw for 28 passes, completed 23 of them, yet he got over 330 yards and 5 touchdowns. Everything worked.
To that point, Shane, and there's already rumblings beginning, and I think it's way too early to even talk about pulling the ripcord on this, but let's not forget that Caleb Williams is not necessarily Ben Johnson's guy. Like, we know he came to Chicago because he likes what Williams can do, but he wasn't there when they drafted him. He made the decision, however, to keep Tyson Bagent as the backup quarterback and to reward him with a new contract. He could well decide at some point, if things are going south quickly, let's put in Bagent and sit Caleb for a bit and let him watch a bit of football and learn.
Yeah, it really wouldn't surprise me. Again, let's not overreact too much. There's still a lot of football for the Bears to play. I know they're 0-2. The Cowboys, Raiders, Commanders, and Saints coming up might be a bit more wiggle room for them to really find their feet. We see a lot of times when teams have a slow start, they actually have a really good October, November. So I'm not pressing panic just yet, but I think Caleb needs to realize this isn't USC anymore. He can't just improvise his way to the Heisman Trophy and to being the number one pick. Against NFL defenses who will plan meticulously for you, you have to stick with the meticulous plan of Ben Johnson, who's been hired because of his proven ability to do that. And that relationship needs to repair itself if the Bears are going to make any progress this year.
Well, we are sticking with the plan here on the Irish NFL show. If you're watching us live, of course, you still got 2 games to look forward to tonight, and enjoy them if you're staying up. We got Bucks Texans and Raiders Chargers, and AFC West, as we were just talking about that division, a particularly intriguing clash there. Enjoy both of those, and if you're listening to us after the fact, you can check out our reaction podcasts wherever you get yours.